Hello Nigerians, we have a breaking news and this is very serious. Something is happening right now at the fuel pumps in Abuja and it is exposing a crack in the story we have all been told about falling petrol prices in this country. Stay with me to the end of this one because by the time we are done, you will understand exactly why some Nigerians are driving past NNPC stations to buy fuel somewhere else and what that decision is costing both sides. This story is unfolding right now in the Federal Capital Territory, in places like Gwarinpa, Kubwa Expressway, and Wuse, at a moment when Nigerians are already stretched thin by the cost of living and every single naira at the pump matters. If you are new to this channel, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the like icon so you do not miss the next update on this fast-moving fuel price story because this thing is changing almost by the day. Now, back to the news. What we are looking at is a quiet but very telling boycott. Not organized by any union, not announced by any protest group, just ordinary motorists voting with their engines and choosing to avoid the state-owned oil company's own filling stations. Let us walk through exactly what happened, when it happened, and what NNPC has done about it.
Here is what we know for certain. On Monday, the 10th of August, filling station attendants in Abuja told Daily Post Nigeria that patronage at NNPC limited stations had dropped drastically. One attendant, speaking on condition of anonymity because he was not authorized to speak to the press, described the afternoon as almost dead. He said he had barely served between 4 and 10 customers the entire day, and that motorists were openly complaining about the price on his pump. This was not happening in isolation. Just a short drive away, other brands, MRS, AA Rano, Sharon, and several independent marketers had already slashed their pump prices. MRS in particular had cut its price by 50 naira, bringing it down to 1,210 naira per litre in Abuja and its surrounding areas. That is the second time in under 2 weeks that MRS had reduced its price. Meanwhile, at NNPC's own outlets in Gwarinpa, Wuse Zone 4 and Wuse Zone 6, the price had stayed stubbornly high, sitting between 1,299 naira and 1,310 naira per litre. That gap, roughly 50 to 100 naira per litre, was the difference motorists were reacting to. In a city like Abuja, where many people fill their tanks 2 or 3 times a week, that gap adds up fast, and drivers noticed.
Let us slow down and look properly at the numbers because numbers do not lie, even when explanations get complicated. As of Monday, the 10th of August, NNPC's Abuja price sat at around 1,299 naira per litre. MRS, sourcing its product from Dangote Refinery, was selling at 1,210 naira. That is an 89 naira difference on a single litre. Now think about that for a moment. An average Nigerian sedan carries somewhere around 45 to 60 liters of fuel. At an 89 naira gap, a full tank at MRS could save a motorist anywhere from 4,000 to over 5,000 naira compared to filling up at NNPC. For business owners running fleets, delivery vans or commercial buses, that difference multiplies very quickly across a week, a month, a year. This is not the first time this year that NNPC's pricing has lagged behind competitors before catching up. Going back to early August, on the 7th, NNPC had already cut its Abuja price from 1,335 naira to 1,299 naira, a 36 naira reduction. In Lagos, that same day, NNPC moved its price down by 10 naira from 1,265 to 1,255 naira. But even after that cut, competitors kept moving faster and NNPC kept finding itself playing catch-up in the very market it is supposed to be leading.
Now, here is where the story takes its latest turn, and this is fresh. This is happening as we speak. On Tuesday, the 11th of August, checks across several NNPC retail outlets in the Federal Capital Territory showed that the company had finally moved. The price came down from 1,299 naira to 1,250 naira per litre, a reduction of 49 naira. This new lower price was confirmed at NNPC stations in Gwarimpa, along the Kubwa Expressway, and at both Wuse Zone 4 and Wuse Zone 6, the very same locations where attendants had been complaining about empty forecourts just a day earlier. Motorists at these stations were now paying 49 naira less per litre than they had been paying on Monday. Here is what remains unclear, and this is important. NNPC has not, as of this recording, issued a detailed public statement explaining why the earlier price stayed high while competitors moved first, or laying out a clear pricing formula that Nigerians can follow going forward. What we have is what the checks on the ground show. Prices adjusting quietly, station by station, without the kind of formal announcement Nigerians might expect from a company of NNPC's size and importance to the economy.
To understand this moment, you need to understand the road that led here, because this did not start last week. It started building from late May of this year, when NNPC stations were already selling below 1,330 naira per litre, with major depots averaging between 1,277 naira in Lagos and 1,290 naira in Calabar. Then, on the 27th and 28th of June, NNPC cut its Abuja pump price a second time within a single week, moving from 1,260 naira down to 1,110 naira. Barely a week later, on the 5th of July, another cut followed, taking the price from 1,210 naira down to 1,150 naira. By the 13th of July, prices had fallen again, this time from 1,170 naira to 1,110 naira nationally. In under 2 weeks in early July alone, Nigerians saw a cumulative drop of 110 naira per litre. This rapid, almost weekly movement created its own problems. In mid-July, some marketers, uncertain how to price fuel they had already bought at a higher wholesale cost, simply suspended fresh purchases. That led to temporary station closures in cities including Ibadan. So, this price war has not been painless. It has come with real disruption on the ground, even as headlines celebrated falling prices.
Now, let us talk about why prices have been falling at all, because this boycott story does not exist in a vacuum. Two forces are driving this. The first is Dangote Petroleum Refinery. On Tuesday, the 5th of August, Dangote cut its ex-depot petrol price by 50 naira, from 1,215 naira down to 1,165 naira. The refinery also cut its diesel price by 80 naira, from 1,650 naira down to 1,570 naira. Dangote's communications team described this as part of what they called improved operational efficiencies and favorable market conditions, and framed it as part of a broader commitment to affordability for ordinary Nigerians and lower energy costs for businesses. Whether you take that framing at face value or see it as clever positioning in a competitive market, the practical effect has been the same: downward pressure on pump prices across the country. The second force is global. International crude oil prices tumbled in early August, with Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate falling into the range of $69 to $76 per barrel, down sharply from levels above $100 earlier in the year. Traders linked part of that slide to reports of diplomatic progress between the United States and Iran, which eased fears of supply disruption in the Middle East. Lower crude means lower cost of imported and refined products across the board, giving both Dangote and NNPC genuine room to cut prices, not just a marketing gesture. Let us be very precise here, because this is where a lot of online commentary starts to blur fact and assumption. Here is what we know for certain. NNPC's Abuja prices were documented through direct checks by reporters as higher than MRS and other competitors for a period spanning roughly the first 10 days of August. Attendants at NNPC stations directly told journalists that patronage had fallen. NNPC's price did come down on the 11th of August, matching the pattern of previous catch-up cuts seen in June and July. Here is what remains allegation or interpretation, not confirmed fact. Some Nigerians online have suggested that NNPC deliberately delays price cuts to protect profit margins before eventually matching competitors once the public pressure builds. NNPC has not confirmed or denied that specific claim in relation to this incident. It is equally possible and just as consistent with the fact we have that NNPC's pricing structure, given its size, its national spread, and its internal approval processes, simply moves slower than smaller, more nimble private marketers who can adjust a single station's price sheet within hours. Both explanations are plausible. Neither has been proven with documentary evidence in this specific case. What is in dispute is the outcome. For a window of roughly 1 to 2 days, Nigerian motorists in Abuja had a clear financial incentive to avoid NNPC stations, and many of them acted on that incentive.
Now, here is a detail that many casual observers miss, and it matters because it complicates the simple story of falling fuel prices. While petrol, known officially as premium motor spirit, has been on a broadly downward path through the middle of this year, diesel, known as automotive gas oil, has moved in the completely opposite direction. According to data from the National Bureau of Statistics, the average retail price of diesel rose by 86.40% year-on-year, climbing to 3,277 naira per litre in May of this year, up from just 1,758 naira a year earlier. Even in the short space between April and May of this year alone, diesel prices jumped by over 32%. Why does this matter to ordinary Nigerians who do not drive diesel vehicles? Because diesel is the fuel of commerce. It powers the trucks that move food from farms to markets, the generators that keep small businesses running during power outages, the buses that transport goods across state lines. So even as petrol headlines bring good news for the car-owning motorist filling up in Abuja or Lagos, the cost of moving goods around Nigeria has, by this measure, nearly doubled. That is a quieter but arguably more painful story for the price of bread, tomatoes, and transport fares across the country.
This price competition has not gone unnoticed at the top. Nigeria's Minister of Petroleum Resources, Heineken Olokpobiri, has publicly called on the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, the NMDPRA, to clamp down on marketers accused of exploiting consumers through elevated pricing. That call itself tells you something. It suggests that even within government, there is a recognition that not every player in this market has been passing on the benefit of falling wholesale prices to the ordinary Nigerian at the pump. We saw this play out directly just days before the NNPC story broke. When Dangote cut its ex-depot price by 50 naira on the 6th of August, many filling stations across the country, including major brands like MRS and AP, initially kept selling between 1,240 naira and 1,260 naira, essentially holding on to the difference rather than passing it to motorists immediately. Transport workers and motorists publicly called on regulators to step in and force retailers to reflect the savings. So this is not simply a two-way contest between NNPC and its private competitors. It is a three-way tension between the refiners setting wholesale prices, the retailers deciding how quickly to adjust their pumps, and a regulator and minister watching from Abuja, occasionally speaking up, but so far relying largely on market competition and public pressure rather than direct intervention to keep prices honest.
Now, let us be fair and give the industry side of this too, because it is easy from the outside to assume greed is always the explanation. The Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, has publicly called on NNPC's Group Chief Executive Officer, Bashir Bayo Ojulari, to accelerate ongoing supply arrangements with Dangote Refinery and to provide a clear, definite timeline for how pricing will work going forward. IPMAN argues that greater transparency in that relationship would meaningfully boost public confidence in the entire downstream reform process that Nigeria has been going through since the deregulation of the sector. This is a legitimate point. Marketers, including NNPC itself, are not simply choosing prices out of thin air.
They are buying product at ex-depot rates that themselves have been moving rapidly, sometimes by 50 naira or more within a single week. A station that buys fuel today at one price cannot instantly reprice its existing tank of fuel purchased at yesterday's higher cost without taking a loss. That reality partly explains why in mid-July, some marketers chose to pause purchases entirely rather than sell at a loss, leading to those temporary station closures we mentioned earlier in Ibadan. Dangote Refinery, for its part, opened up direct sales of petrol to all licensed marketers in recent months, ending a previous consortium arrangement, and even launched a free delivery program for marketers across 6 states, pricing product at 1,075 naira per litre in its first phase as part of what it calls its Vision 2030 strategy. Whether that translates into consistently lower prices for the ordinary Nigerian motorist or simply shifts where the profit sits along the supply chain is something we will only know with time.
It is also worth stepping back to see how uneven this price landscape is across Nigeria, because Abuja is not the whole story. Data gathered from NNPC's own retail network shows petrol prices varying wildly depending on location, from around 1,170 naira per litre in the cheapest states to as high as 1,395 naira in others. Lagos and Ogun have consistently posted the lowest prices nationwide, largely because of their proximity to refining and import infrastructure. Yobe, Bauchi, and Sokoto, further from that infrastructure, have recorded the highest prices, reflecting the added cost of transporting fuel over longer distances. Outside the big cities, the gaps are just as visible. In Warri, depots such as Mainland, Sobas, and Soroman have been selling around 1,220 naira per litre, with Matrix pegged slightly higher at 1,225 naira. In Calabar, prices have tended to run even higher, with Zigmond around 1,222 naira and Rain Oil topping the list at 1,230 naira, a full 15 naira above Dangote Refinery's own ex-depot rate at the time. What this tells us is that the Abuja boycott story, dramatic as it is really just the most visible flashpoint of a much wider pattern playing out quietly in dozens of towns and cities, where the gap between what one filling station charges and what another charges just a few kilometers away can be significant enough to change where people choose to fill their tanks.
Let us bring this back down to earth, because at the end of the day, this is not just a story about corporate pricing strategy. It is a story about household budgets. For the average commercial driver in Abuja, a driver who might fill up daily or every other day, the difference between 1,210 naira and 1,300 naira per litre is not abstract. It is the difference between making a profit on a trip and barely breaking even. For small business owners who depend on generators because of unreliable electricity supply, every naira saved or lost on fuel shows up directly in their cost of production and eventually in the price they charge their customers. For families, the ripple effect travels through transport fares, through the cost of food moved by truck from farm to market, and through the diesel-powered logistics that keep shops stocked. This is exactly why a story about motorists avoiding one brand of filling station in favor of another matters far beyond Abuja's city limits. It is a small, visible symptom of a much larger negotiation happening across Nigeria's downstream oil sector right now. A negotiation between refiners, marketers, regulators, and millions of ordinary Nigerians who simply want to know that the price on the pump reflects the true, fair cost of the product, not a delay, not a margin being quietly protected, but a fair price, updated promptly wherever you happen to be filling your tank.
Before we close, let us lay out fairly the strongest version of each side's case, because that is what serious journalism demands. On one side, the case against NNPC's pricing behavior is straightforward. When competitors moved first and NNPC lagged for days at a time, Nigerians paid more than they needed to at NNPC stations, full stop. A state-owned company, funded ultimately by the Nigerian people, arguably carries a higher duty to move quickly and transparently on pricing than a private competitor chasing market share. On the other side, NNPC and its defenders could reasonably argue that a company operating filling stations in all 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, with existing fuel stock purchased at earlier, higher wholesale prices, cannot always reprice instantly without absorbing losses that ultimately still come from public resources. They could point out that NNPC did in fact adjust its price within roughly a day of the patronage drop being reported, a faster response than some private marketers showed after Dangote's own price cut earlier in the month. Both arguments have merit. Neither fully resolves the core tension at the heart of Nigeria's downstream sector right now, that deregulation was supposed to bring competition and lower prices through market forces, and in many respects it has, but it has also exposed just how uneven and at times unpredictable that competition can be for the ordinary Nigerian standing at the pump with a fuel gauge on empty.
So where does this leave us? My honest take is simple. This story is a reminder that competition only works for ordinary Nigerians when it comes with transparency. NNPC and every other player in this market owe the public a clear, timely explanation of how and when prices move, not just quiet adjustments discovered by reporters standing at the pump. Regulators like the NMDPRA have a real role to play here, and Nigerians deserve to see that role exercised consistently, not just when a story like this one starts trending. There are still open questions worth watching closely. Will NNPC now move to match competitor prices faster in future rounds of this ongoing price war? Or will we see this same pattern repeat itself in 2 or 3 weeks? Will the government's regulator actually act on the minister's call to clamp down on marketers who are slow to pass on savings, or will that remain just a statement? And with diesel prices still climbing sharply, even as petrol falls, how long before that quieter crisis starts showing up in the price of food and transport fares across the country? If this story matters to you, and if you know someone still confused about why fuel prices seem to change every other week in this country, do me a favor, like this video, share it with them, and drop your thoughts in the comment section. I read every single one. This has been Naija News Online, bringing you the story behind the price at the pump, because in this economy, every naira deserves an explanation. Until next time, take care on yourselves and drive safely out there.